crackheads and the junkies. Well, you know, really, it's a in some cases, unfortunately, a really slippery slope from going to a party animal to a drug addict. And our society has this real, you know, focus on youth and enjoying youth and having fun and doing what you want and all this rebellious, you know, cool stuff, you know, grow up as fast as you can, sex, drugs, and rock and roll. It's just driven into us in many ways through media because people can profit through that. You know, youth have more spending money than almost any other kind of generation. So it's just, you know, the marketing for these things is really intense. And so, you know, the just go from a little party once in a while to going to hell can happen real quick. And this is an example, I think, of someone who is, you know, a beautiful young person. And I think it's fairly obvious. I think that's, you know, that a year and a half later, drugs have really affected her in a lot of ways. And it's something that it's easy to stereotype, but it can unfortunately happen to almost anyone who has a bad weekend or gets too drunk and starts, you know, doing drugs that they don't even know what they're doing. And the cycle of addiction and crime is something that is really rooted, again, in poverty and in escapism from poverty. And not entirely, but really, I think that's one of the greatest areas of impact.
Do you think the term addiction is related in particular to people in poverty and not to people who have the means to purchase to fund their addictions through legitimate means?
No, I think it's more broad because we use the term addictions to Hollywood types that end up in all their rehab programs because, you know, who knows how many rock stars and other people are, you know, openly talking about their addictions. And you could, like, you know, go to a supermarket right now and read about a whole bunch of famous people that have been or are and should be or could be addicted to one thing or another. So, no, I don't think that it's, you know, sort of stereotyped. It's just that, you know, the obvious people that have problems with their addictions are the ones on the street. And I think society has characterized people with addictions as not having a problem until they can't handle their drug use anymore. As long as you can afford it and keep going to work every day, you don't have an addiction for the most part, as far as society is concerned. But it's, you know, the whole cycle of addiction and crime is really tied together. And so when the police go and say they're going to, like, sweep up the downtown and get all the crack addicts, for example, they're really, as I've heard one member of LEAP say, for every time they arrest someone selling crack, they've created a job opportunity. Because what happens is they sweep up all these people and catch them with small amounts of drugs or not, but usually they catch them with a little bit of something anyway. And when they get let out of jail the next day, that person has two problems. For one, they got to get a fix because they've been in jail for at least 24 hours. And secondly, they got to pay off what they had lost the day before, as well as getting a fix. So if you think you had a criminal causing problems selling crack on the corner, well, the fact is that whoever they were selling crack to is going to be coming back the next day, and somebody's just going to replace them on the corner. But the next day, you're not only going to have a new person selling crack because there's good money in it, but the other person that you arrested the day before is going to be committing more crimes so that they can buy more crack from some other dealer, and then they may end up not only having to commit more crimes, but set up crack dealing in some other neighborhood because they're probably not allowed back downtown again. And so the crack dealing is going to continue occurring where the market is going to show up, as well as, you know, all of this other peripheral crime being committed in order to maintain their habit. So I'm not saying that this is this lady's story at all, but, you know, there's really a real fine line at times in society between what is accepted drug use and what isn't. And one of the unfortunate results of Prohibition, and I think one of the signs of how impossible it is to curb drug use, is the prevalence that drug use has in the United States and in the media. And it's really impossible for us to imagine having drugs prohibited, because as we've just touched upon, drug use is not simply and only occurring amongst the poor. Drug use, the drug market, illegal drugs, cocaine in particular, I believe, is being driven by people in middle and upper class incomes. Certainly when I go back to Ontario, where I'm from, and I smoke pot with my friends, or try to, a lot of them won't smoke pot anymore. It smells, they could, get in trouble, the wife could pick up on it, but, doing cocaine apparently is all right because nobody can smell it, and somehow you're able to make it to work the next day. And again, as long as you're able to make it to work every day and afford what you're doing, most people don't think that, constant use of certain hard drugs is a problem at all. In fact, there's certain subcultures that, promote the use of even cocaine, and it's for many people not a very healthy way to live your daily life. But in the United States, in a lot of communities, rich and poor, the use of cocaine is simply an accepted part of daily life. And for the paramilitary or whoever to think that somehow that group of people is just going to be put into a jail is really a very obviously divisive policy. But the cocaine use and heroin use that occurs in the United States that causes a lot of these social problems, because let's admit it, really, certainly when it comes to cannabis, the social impact of prohibition that occurs in cannabis is not like we're all getting stoned and driving into a bunch of kids getting onto a school bus. That's not really the general experience. When they study that particular issue, as we've said, people that are stoned and experienced at driving and such are actually better drivers. So, the impact really is quite minor when it comes to cannabis. And for the most part, if you didn't have to commit crimes or do something other, to pay for it, and if it was pure, the cocaine and heroin that's being used, and I wouldn't say it about meth, but the cocaine and heroin being used isn't really causing a lot of psychotic episodes or people to, as I'm even saying, often even lose their jobs and stuff like that. A lot of people seem to be able to function using these drugs. It's the problems from prohibition, the violence in the Lower Mainland and the other problems that occur in the environment and such, and economically, are because of the prohibition of drugs, right? Not the actual use of them. And so it's really staggering when you start to look at it on a world scale, where and how all of these various drugs are transported and who's doing it, where it comes from. In this little diagram here, you can see where there are several points throughout South America where the cocaine is collected, you could say, gradually, from the mountainous areas and brought to places where it can be put on boats and then taken around to Europe, where there's obviously a huge market and a lot of people where these drugs are being consumed. I don't have numbers on the cocaine use in Europe and such, but we may stereotype North America as being a cocaine using kind of hip hop or whatever kind of community. But I'm telling you, when I go back to Ontario and talk to my buddies and what they're using and how and stuff, not all of them, like God, like all my friends are pretty much like they have their homes, they got a wife and kid, they got a job, sometimes they own their businesses and shit. Not the majority of them don't use coke by any sense, they all drink their heads off. But there are, for me, a staggering percentage of them that do use coke, sometimes quite a bit, sometimes just once in a while. But, they're white, middle class, work your ass off kind of folk. They're not like, and to them, for the most part, yeah, it's not a problem. And so, that's who's fueling this route into Europe, right? As far as I know, they don't have the huge hip hop culture, but I'm telling you, they'll probably use almost as much coke in Europe as they do in the United States. They just don't throw as many people in jail for it.